So, hello everyone, and welcome to the Lost in Translation show, where we explore yesterday to help mankind understand what's happening in the world today. So, it's been a while since my last podcast. I've not posted many shows on this channel lately. I've been focusing on efforts, speaking at some engagements across the country and organizing some events too, and also just being on other people's channels. So, over the next few months, our guest lineup is exceptional and includes authors, activists, and historians. So, I look forward to sharing all that information with my viewers. Today, we have author Kathleen Goble, who co wrote The Fight for the Future of Humanity, making the case for the 28th Amendment. In this book, Kathleen and her co author, Booker Scott, put forward the argument for the 28th Amendment, as our rights to privacy are repeatedly violated by technology companies, government entities, and hostile foreign nations. And I just want to apologize for the quality today. I had to come down to a park and I'm sitting in the barbecue section. It looks like I'm broadcasting from the state prison, but I'm just here by the beautiful Sacramento River getting out of the wind. Anyway, we have Kathleen Goble because AI is everywhere and nowhere. It's on your phone, your news feed, and at your doctor's office, quietly deciding what you see and what you don't without you ever realizing it. Every day we hear statements like AI is going to take our jobs, that AI has destroyed the concept of privacy, and that AI is going to become sentient and take over the world. What should the average person fear from AI? But also, how can we and do we benefit from the technology while preserving our rights? To answer these challenging questions and provide solutions to protect our privacy, here's Kathleen Goble. Welcome.
Thank you, Simone, and thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you're welcome. I've seen you speak at some different events and really enjoyed our conversations after. So, this is something that so many people are concerned about today, but the average person really has no idea how to control it. And if we're to be honest, I'm 62 years old. This kind of technology has probably been managing a good portion of my life since at least I was in high school. And now we're just becoming aware of its power. Would you kind of agree with that?
Absolutely. In fact, I ran across a quote not long ago by Max Tegmark, who's online quite a bit. He's an MIT physicist and he studies intelligence. And he had made this interesting observation. He said, up until recently, and he made this statement last year, but he said, up until recently, much of what has been said about AI has been hype until the last 4 years. And now we are underestimating it. So, and I really believe that's the case because until about a year ago, I'm not an AI insider, but until about a year ago, I didn't know anything about it either. And then started the research on the book and was very surprised at what I discovered in the process. And so I know that's part of the reason we're here to talk about it. But yes, it is absolutely, and it could very well be one of the most consequential issues of our time.
So, before we get started on that, why don't you just tell us a little bit about you and your background, how you became interested in this topic? Is it related to the
Sure.
work you do in your regular job?
It is. It is. It's so I until last year, as I mentioned, I really knew very little about AI. I was just a user. I was just somebody that was using it on a regular basis. I knew AI was involved sort of in the background of things, like for example, Grammarly. I've been a Grammarly subscriber for some time, and in the work that I've done, I've been very active in local politics, gosh, since 2008. And much of what I've been doing required communication. So a lot of writing, a lot of speaking, been the president of some local nonprofit organizations and or an officer in some capacity, doing a lot of volunteer work as well. And then kind of have a diverse educational background as well, business and law and theology. And so I found myself doing more and more writing. And what ended up happening last year was I was contacted by Booker Scott. He lives in Florida, Tampa Bay, and has quite a large following online. He's been to radio for a number of years, and he had asked me if I'd be interested in partnering and writing the book with him. So we did that. The nexus of the book is interesting as well. It dates back to 2014 when Booker had a very interesting lunch with a futurist and a man who had made the statement to him that even back then, so that's going back 12, 13 years now, that there were already people writing code. So machines, robots, AI, as we would say today, would have sentient, feeling, as you mentioned, and be able to experience the consciousness and all of the same emotions that we do. And that was something that stuck with Booker since then. And when he contacted me last year, he said, I think this is an idea and a book whose time has come. So that's how we got started. And the book was released last fall. I think August is when it came out on Amazon.
All right, and we'll have more information about your book in the comments section if people want to. And then at the end, we'll give your detailed information too. So this may
Sure.
seem like kind of a crazy question because people assume they know what it means, but what technically is AI?
That's a great question, and it's a great place to start. It's artificial intelligence, and we're just kind of sort of basically hearing about it now. Sort of the average person, maybe just the last couple of years. It's like, where did it come from? It's actually been around for a very long time. 1955, 1956. Back at the Dartmouth conference, Marvin Minsky, John McCarthy, there were a lot of scientists involved, and they were experimenting, talking about the possibility of making machines have the ability to make human type decisions. So basically, artificial intelligence is today sort of a broad term, all encompassing, referring to the idea that a machine can do what a human being can do, sort of replicate our abilities in the area of intelligence and thinking.
So do you believe that they can have personal feelings and emotions, that they can replicate humanity? I personally think it's been highly exaggerated. And this has been since the beginning of the time you were a theologian. This is almost like being God. So, is there a little bit of this narcissistic God syndrome going on in the AI crowd?
I would say a lot. And, it's kind of like anything else. I mean, there's the full spectrum. When I speak or write or talk to people, you get all kinds of reactions and from from both extremes, I should say. There are people that say, hey, this is the Antichrist. We can't have anything to do with it. And then the other extreme being, this is the solution. It's going to be the cure and be all for everything. And, I watched an interesting interview last year Tucker Carlson had done with Sam Altman. Sam Altman is a co-founder of Open, ChatGPT, owned by OpenAI, and he talked to him about how AI is some people look at it as sort of like a god-like creature, and of course we're seeing that there are people, vulnerable people within our population, who have committed suicide based on feedback or dialogue that they've had with AI. Young people that are vulnerable or can be deceived. Those kinds of things have happened. We've seen some very bad things happen with AI. So really, the full gamut, the full spectrum, as far as will a machine have sentience or feeling? I think that is an impossibility. As a person who's a follower of the Lord Jesus Christ, I am not somebody who believes that anything man can create could ever be turned into, or completely replace human being or replicate the value of a human life. So now, long answer, but the question from me personally would be no. However, there are those that do believe that and have gone so far. There's a scientific community that would say and argue the value of a machine or its sentience should be defined purely by the fact that it can make human-like decisions. Therefore, they would define that as something that does, in fact, have consciousness.
Well, as we know, who has created this stuff? This is going to be my next question for you. But the military industrial complex created the computer. So it's a war machine. It's a war on our mind. It's a war on humanity. It's a control mechanism, although we've achieved a lot of these things. And personally, I believe they're the evil ones. And of course, not everybody at every level, but the high level people are the evil ones. And they're going to blame the computers for what they have programmed into the computers, like you said, where they've got AI convincing people to kill themselves. To me, that sounds like some crazy DARPA thing. Remember when they got caught turning our uh, cameras on? Well, they caused problems with our computer to see how we would react. So I just think it's another situation. All of these, many of these figures in technology and the military have these God complex symptoms. They've been fun. One of the reasons that some of these big tech companies are really government entities is because, for instance, Google operated for 30 years without a return on investment, and they continue to get billions of dollars. I spent the first 15 years of my career raising venture capital for public companies. This does not happen. Okay. And a lot of these people had no career. Supposedly, they started Apple in their garage. It's because the government spun it off to some of their relatives when it became profitable after using all of our money. There was no history of the company ever existed. LifeLog and Facebook are a prime example. So they had to say they started it in their garage because for the first 20 years it took to develop the technology, they had no offices or employees. So the AI technology thing really bothers me. A lot of the people, you can connect the people in charge of these technology companies to the bloodlines, to the satanic cults. So I think it's another way of screwing around with us. They're really just collecting our data to control us, is my personal opinion. And that's the goal of all of it. And it's definitely in many ways not to help us because they say, oh, well, it's going to help big pharma. Oh, really? Because right now, big pharma has been completely changed where doctors don't even treat illness anymore. They just give us medication. And now computers are going to tell us what we should do. So, all right. So, where did AI come from? I kind of covered it a little bit, but you probably have a better, more academic discussion than I just gave you.
Well, I think you kind of summed it up. I mean, we've come a long way, obviously, since the 1955, 56, series of them discussing, experimenting with this. And then, in the last 10 years, we've seen significant advances now. We've got, Anthropic, Dario Amodei, who had worked for OpenAI, ChatGPT with Sam Altman. We've got, uh, Anthropic is the owner, or the developer of Claude AI. So we've got these, they call them LLMs, large language models. We've got Claude, we've got ChatGPT, we've got Gemini. So people would be familiar with those, but there are a lot of smaller AIs that are being built to do other things. AI, in the recent history, last couple of years, has been what would be defined as narrow, very task specific, to do one assignment. The developers and the large language model CEOs and those big companies are quickly marching towards something they refer to as AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. That would be an AI that spans multiple domains. Um, whether that's actually the case or not is questionable. Sometimes, like you've mentioned, and you do a great job of exposing these types of things. What's really truth and what's not? What are we being told because others want us to believe? And that's the challenging part, with anything in this day and time. What's true, what's not? We're in a day and time where obviously, video, audio, anything can be manipulated. And so it's very difficult sometimes to get to the bottom line of what's actually happening. But there are a lot of concerns, obviously, by people, especially with regards to privacy. And you mentioned that as well, about what is happening and how is it being used. Our data has been scraped for many years now by these large social media companies, and not only has it been profitable for them because they turn around and sell it, but also it's been a case where do we have any say? Are we even aware of how it's being used? And the answer is no, we don't.
Do you think they're using it? They did some movies with Tom Cruise. I forget, Minority Report, where they're predictively programming which of us is going to rebel against the system. Like, for instance, I know I'm on the list and you're on the list. Is this being classified for long term? I noticed they opened up X again, another major technology company, and now they have all of the conservative people able to express themselves. They're databasing that, logging it, and profiling us. And I even listen to a lot of short stories when I'm trying to break away from the stuff that I usually listen to. And I've noticed all of a sudden they've started incorporating things that are going into my life. I get migraine headaches, so they've incorporated migraines into my stories. A lot of the nemesises in the different stories about family have my sisters' names now. So it just, and my sisters are Amber and Danielle, which aren't really super common names. I mean, yes, they're, but especially in their age group, they're not that common. So it's picking up that kind of data from me to incorporate into the short stories that are being generated. So do you have any comment on like a more expansive view besides just the military industrial complex use of how they're, I guess this is more to monetize it, right? Because there's different.
Yes, in fact, you just exactly weren't what I was where I was thinking, which was the profitability of it. I neither of us are on the young side of our lives or careers, and I remember Y2K, and all the fears about airplanes are going to fall out of the sky, and everybody talked about Big Brother, and of course George Orwell's book in 1984, and all these things. We used to be so worried about the government spying on us, and then all of a sudden, and it didn't seem like long after, of course, could have been the Patriot Act introduced in 2000 and well, shortly after, 9/11 and 2001. I was in the financial services industry then, and you could see, a significant ramp up of the government and public entities gathering our private data and doing so legally became very profitable. That think how many times they've been able to sell that. Social media companies, and it was interesting to see the quick transformation, I think, in public opinion of all of a sudden it was okay to put family photos online. Here's what my grandchildren are eating on Facebook, and I'm thinking, where did that transition happen? But when you look back now, here we are in 2026. It's been sort of the frog in the boiling water analogy. We have been I think, and maybe not quite so slowly, being conditioned that it's okay to have all of this public data. You go to the doctor's office today, the questions that they ask you are very invasive, and many of them don't have anything to do with your health. It's I think it's very alarming. I think people should be concerned about our privacy and our public data. And that's also happening now. We're seeing that on the largest levels of government. There was a video I saw last year released with, it was an interview that Larry Ellison was doing of Oracle. He's been brought into the White House on the TikTok deal, a very influential and powerful man. And he was talking about how our data in the United States is different than the data being managed in the UK. And he said, our data in the United States is fragmented, which sounds like a bad thing. And so here again, paying attention to how words are being used and what we're being told, he says our data has been siloed in the past, kept separately, different departments, different agencies. Now they want to merge it all. They want to make it all unified. So that would mean different, 3 and 4 letter agencies in the United States are taking our data, putting it all together so it's readily accessible. Your IRS records now might be available over here with Department of Homeland Security or Social Security or any of these other agencies, and that should be very alarming to people.
I have one word for you: Palantir.
Palantir is everywhere. Absolutely
It's here
powerful.
in
And if you look
Shasta
at the
County.
government contracts,
It's here in
yep,
Shasta County. And what do they
yeah.
target areas? Anybody who watches my channel and has seen the fire experts All the fires that we've had here are in the 14 counties under Palantir's observation. And what is Palantir used by Israel and the UK and the EU? So I do not think it's friendly to the independent people of the nation. This was my problem with J.D. Vance. He was put forward by Peter Thiel, the same one who put Palantir. He went to college on a Soros scholarship. So I have been upset about this since he was first nominated, because this is, and they're touting him as being the next president. So the New World Order track and trace system is being implemented by the Republican government, although it started with Incutel back in the 80s with George Bush Sr. and the CIA. So let's just see what CIA program ended up being really beneficial to humanity 40 years later. And so this is while we're paying attention to what's going on in Iran and Israel and Ukraine, and we're arguing about what movie stars said, they're implementing Palantir across all government agencies. And you can go Google what contracts does Palantir have. At the same time, Google your local general plan to see how those different strategies are being implemented in the general plan. And then go to your phone and to ChatGPT and use it for a useful purpose and say, what constitutional rights is Palantir violating in my county? And then you can start going to your own local, because this is a ground up movement, because the top down isn't working for us, people. It's a ground up movement and you have to literally be fighting it. So that's just something we can add in. But if people want to start pushing back on this technology without waiting for a 28th Amendment, which in my personal belief, like you said, this has been implemented over 75 years ago. So they've already done what they're doing. So, okay, so did we touch on where AI came from? And
Hmm.
where do you think it's leading society today? What dramatic difference do you see in the future?
That's such a great question, and I wish I knew. I can't see into the future, and I'm also, like I said, I'm not an industry insider. I don't know these tech people on a personal level, but I've followed people like Patrick Wood. I actually had the opportunity to speak on the same stage with him a couple of months ago at a conference. Wonderful. Patrick Wood, you can find him online very easily. He's the author of Technocracy, the editor and founder of Technocracy News and Trends. He's been following technocracy for decades, released a new book last year called The Final Betrayal. And he very much, names names and talks specifically about Peter Thiel and the others who've brought AI into the White House and the things that are happening and how it's, infiltrating every area and aspect of our society. But what I see, and somebody that really just started to dig into this deeply only as recently as last year, some of the things that it brought up for me were very fresh reminders of what we went through in the lockdown, through the whole COVID debacle, and the control and how quickly it all happened. It was not some reactionary, homemade type of a solution. You could tell that this had been implemented on the highest levels with how quickly somehow the bars, the strip clubs, and the big box stores stayed open, but the churches were told they couldn't sing. They were shut down. We were told to stay home. And then, somebody, the powers to be, told us that we were essential or non-essential workers, which is, a ludicrous type of a thing. But what concerned me in doing the research on this book were the very many parallels that I saw in this whole process. So it was very much the same type of verbiage, narrative control, the extreme censorship. I'm still censored on a number of these platforms. I have lifetime blocks on all Meta products, for example. So tell me that we have free speech. We absolutely do not. So, and that's still in place, of course. And then, of course, disinformation. We still have people like Hillary Clinton pushing for that. Who decides what is misinformation? And oh, by the way, look at all these things that we were told were grave conspiracies. And there were many people that were punished and sent to prison for saying things that were supposedly conspiracy, which we now know are true. I mean, so many of these things we have absolute proof on now. And now we're seeing this with regards with AI. And, you've seen the presentation and some of the things that I talk about. more than 90% of the information that goes into the training models, and these technocracy companies do not have enough data. They even do things like simulation of data. My understanding is that they have as many as 50,000 data points on each and every one of us, which is phenomenal. I mean, think of yourself as even having 50,000 pieces of data about you. But you mentioned your sisters being mentioned, and also, it's no coincidence when you're on Amazon or you're on Netflix or any of these other types of things that things pop up, ads that are specifically targeted to you because they've been tracking your data and collecting it for some time. And so it is with the AI. And my point being, where this is going, that's the question you asked. I discovered in the research that more than 90% of the data that goes into training these large language models comes from only three sources. Three sources. So that would be Reddit, Wikipedia, and then YouTube. So all this data is
All
basically
government
being
entities.
homogenized. There you go. And if you look at and listen to Larry Sanger, who is, my understanding is, was the founder of Wikipedia. He said it is turned into the most blatant propaganda, left wing manufacturing, source of data. The problem is, whenever you go to anything, and it doesn't matter what browser you go to, you pop in a question, which, by the way, is how most people still use AI, which is not the way to use it. But you type in something, whether it's a map location, a restaurant review, whatever it is, there's more than a 90% chance that data is coming from Wikipedia. So, or, pull up a profile on somebody, especially somebody that might be, right leaning or or considered a conservative, and what is listed on Wikipedia is horrific. In fact, look up the definition. I did this recently. Look up the definition in Wikipedia of a fascism or a fascist, and it only and specifically says a right leaning radical person. So right there, and this is the data that's being used and fed into everything, even into our school systems. AI is in there teaching our children and grandchildren in public schools. So it and we don't really see where this is coming from. So
The
it goes
fascists.
so much deeper and so much further than what we're even aware of, and yet we just kind of get lulled into the complacency of thinking, oh my gosh, okay, this definition I pulled up on Wikipedia, it must be right. It's absolutely not. It's there because that's what they want you to believe.
Well, again, it's the fascists who are running the computer. Like when I went to college, the definition, and this has been as far back as the word fascist been used from like the 17th century, it meant when the corporations and the government work together to control society. That's what fascism used to mean. And so now we can literally see the government and the corporations working together. I looked up fascism too a couple years ago when everyone was calling everyone a fascist. And I said to a few young people, I'm like, do you even know what fascist means? And they're like, someone who acts in an authoritarian way. And that was literally the thing it said on the internet. And I'm like, no, that's not
Mhm.
what it is. It's when the corporations and the government act together to control the people, like COVID. like, like it was such a good example. And people are like, oh, well, that's not what it says. I'm like, well, get a dictionary that was made 50 years ago, and that's what it's going to say. Right. It's just like they've
Mhm.
changed the meaning of words. We've talked about that when you and I were, and you saw my presentation. They've literally changed the meaning of words, and we're entering into contracts we have no idea we're entering into because they've changed the meaning of our words so much. And if you want to look up the real meaning of different words that are used today in general in society, go to the Black's Law Dictionary and look up what words really mean. Or I think it's, what do they call it?
There's an 1828 dictionary as well, I believe it is.
Yeah,
It
that,
is.
well, the
That's
one
also a
from,
good resource.
yeah, that one's excellent too. But the one that it's in 48, that's a lot of stuff that pertains to Admiralty law and how they've violated the construct that we live in. So if you're literally trying to figure that out, then the Black's Law Dictionary is good because it literally tells you. And then you've got the Urban Dictionary too, which literally tells you what real words mean. And they're usually disgusting that they've incorporated into our usual language. I mean, I was stunned. Everything is some disgusting sexual perversion when you look up the Urban Dictionary and the words that they're teaching our kids in school and what they mean in this construct that we're living in. Um, what do you perceive about the ultimate betrayal of humanity that AI seems to be spearheading? It might.
It's a frustrating thing. It's like anything else, whether it be a gun or the internet. I mean, look what happened when the internet came online, and we're old enough to remember those types of things too, that transition. Or how about the television? I'm not that old, but I remember when, my parents talking about it, grandparents when it came out. Everybody thought it was the Antichrist. It was terrible. I look at AI today as a tool. It can be used for either good or bad. I still use it on a daily basis for writing. I think it's a very powerful, very helpful. We're quickly marching towards what they call agentic AI, where you can assign AI to do a series of repetitive tasks. And AI is also quickly becoming autonomous, which is also can be scary, powerful or not, or nefarious, used for wrong purposes. But that's where you can assign it to do something, give it a task, and it'll run and complete the task in a period of time, maybe 4 hours, maybe a day, afternoon, whatever. You come back and it's finished for you. We hear things about job replacement, where again, that's scary. I mean, we hear about layoffs, Amazon, some of these other tech companies, Salesforce has laid off people as well. And that's something that people should be aware of. I think also, if you listen to what our politicians are saying, we heard Bernie Sanders, we heard Ilhan Omar, others say a few years ago that COVID was a dry run to see, test the level of complacency of the American people. And unfortunately, we didn't fare well in that test. A lot of people just complied, didn't ask questions, and did what they were told, which I think potentially has set us up for more challenges moving forward. There's a lot of talk. We even heard this in the campaigns, political campaigns of certain politicians the last few years, talking about universal basic income. I think Elon Musk now refers to it as universal high income. Sounds good in theory, maybe, potentially. Oh, you don't need to work. We'll just send you a stipend and you'll be dependent on the government forever. But people need to be alarmed by that, because the reality is, and our founding fathers told us, what the government gives, it can also take away. And we do not want to be, as people who are patriots, people who are love our nation, as conservatives, people who very much adhere to our constitutional rights and what the founding fathers established for us, believe in limited government. The government is here to not provide rights. The Constitution is very clear about that. Our rights come from God. So we don't want to march towards that, where we look to the government for handouts or look to them as our benevolent, all meaning, all well-being provider of all the things that we need. So these are the types of questions I think people need to ask, because decisions are being made very quickly that impact all of our lives, and AI is a big part of that because it is a very powerful tool.
I think that we can see the way AI has been used in so many different ways, where it's positive, where they have all of our medical information, et cetera. But when they're collecting AI and data, this is one of my big concerns, when they start denying you rights or medical treatment because you have a low chance of survival and the funds aren't going to be spent there. To me, this is the real fear. It's the profiling. And we all know who's going to be profiled, the people who won't consent. So that's my biggest fear as an independent media person. I don't know if this ever happens to you, but you'll be standing up speaking to a group of people, and you'll all of a sudden realize, I'm calling out the government, I'm calling out the military, I'm calling out organized religion. And it just dawns on you exactly what you're doing up there. And we're going to be the target to try to break us. And you can see the way they've done it on a mainstream with, celebrities or comedians. I personally think that people have the right to watch who they want to watch, and this whole thing where the right is becoming just as reactive, and they've got everybody in this hyper tension space. And I think that to me,
Hmm.
the biggest concern of AI is because AI is taking all the data and then it's gearing the response. It's like the modern Hegel, right? And the Hegelian dialectic, right? He's getting all of these documents together and then figuring out how to argue against us with our own information and get us to change our minds because it's constantly feeding us. Do you see that? To me, it's more of the effect it has on our mind uh, that's really concerning me right now.
Yes, and as recent as yesterday, seeing the lawsuit and the jury decision about Meta and some of these social media companies that are that are been accused of manipulating us. And these AI, I've heard AI is going to be heading the direction where just like social media, where their desire, and it's for for profitability in part anyway, to keep us on the platform. So they want to engage us. That's easily done. If you spend any time on any of these large social media platforms, you know that it's easy to get you hooked into arguments or, direct and funnel the news. AI's already been doing that for some time, controlling what you see, what you don't see, and getting you hooked into these discussions. Like you said, they've done a great job of pitting us against one another, left versus right, old, young, white, black. I mean, this is historic and traditional, tyrannical, right out of the Saul Alinsky book, for Rules for Radicals. It is all about creating chaos so that they can come in with supposed solutions. And it's all under the pretext and the guise for control, which is a huge problem. AI is that powerful tool now that makes that so much easier. They can do things today that they could not do to us during the COVID shutdown because AI wasn't capable to do that. It wasn't quite prepared. But at this point, it can easily, yeah, like you said, with the data and all the information that's been scraped on us being used against us, and in a much easier, faster manner. Where we're told to stay home, or you can only shop these certain days, or you can't drive your car very far. Kill switches and engines, all those sorts of things. It's all about that control of humanity.
Well, I think people are becoming more aware, but the internet thing with all of us being addicted to our telephone, we're really creating our own reality. I mean, they can track like when you go to the bathroom. One time I'd been drinking beer and I'm not a, huge drinker. And they sent me a thing yesterday for bladder control medication because they tracked me using the restroom. So they're already tracking us. They don't need a chip in our brain. We carry our own chip. We put a camera on our front door and we put in our rooms in our house where that's going to some database. And people are like, well, I don't have anything to hide. I'm like, well, you've got two small children, don't you? They're tracking you in your home. They're watching your interaction. You never know when these things could come up in the future. They have us tracking ourselves and paying to do it. This is really, and most of the people who have these high security ones have money. There is no crime in their neighborhood. Why do they have these stupid monitoring systems? And I can understand, like, and my friends have big homes in their main areas where they have staff. They do have some amount of security, but that's more for their own internal security. But still, all of that information is going to some database at one of these big companies. And if you don't think that the surveillance state is involved in the home tracking devices, I mean, most technology originally comes out of the military in the first place, and then it's implemented into the regular corporations, which again, if it's a technology company, if you dug really deep, there's no mystery that the American taxpayers put up most of the money to develop all these. And as soon as they got profitable, they were spun off to somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, who's a Rockefeller and probably couldn't write a line of code if you asked him to, according to his own insiders. That's not my personal opinion. Okay,
Well,
so
and you mentioned. Simone earlier mentioned the surveillance state, and this isn't some sci-fi thing or anything like that. We're already here. You talked about Palantir awarded billions of dollars in 24 and 2025, of government contracts. And they are worldwide. So the same technology companies that are engaged in, warfare, wargaming, running all kinds of different simulations, drones, technology, surveillance, all that sort of thing, are also on our streets, involved in law enforcement, doing things like predictive policing, which is very alarming. Like you said, pattern recognition is something that computers have been able to do for a very long time, which is wonderful, powerful, but used for bad purposes, very dangerous. So profiling. Are you high risk? Are you somebody who potentially could speak out against the state? And like you mentioned, people naively think, well, I'm not doing anything illegal or wrong. Well, anything can be used against you and us. We've seen that, the attacks against our politicians. We've seen that with, high profile people, media people who spoke out during COVID. We had many people go to prison, go to jail. Everyone from Dr. Simone Gold to Steve Bannon to all of these people, Roger Stone, were greatly persecuted. General Flynn for just coming out and asking questions and calling attention to things that uh, somebody didn't want them talking about. And look what happened to them. And that makes people fearful. They just think, well, I don't want to get involved then, or I'm not going to speak out. But we have to, because if we don't, things continue to get worse and more privacy is taken from us.
And what is the main for thrust of Palantir besides the military applications? They have all of our health data. So personally, I believe this is why they besides to implement the trans agenda into the schools and to get funding for the trans operations, Obamacare was one of the primary pushes of that, but also so the government had control over our medical data, which before theoretically had been kept separate. I don't believe that it had. But we just removed that veil. So, why does a military industrial tracking system need our health info? And again, if you ever watched movies like Sandra Bullock did that movie in the 90s where she gets erased and they put in all of her information that she was a criminal and then everybody was chasing her and she was the right person. And they were giving us the predictive programming, Terminator,
The
Stargate.
Matrix.
Yeah, The Matrix. The Matrix. Okay, I never watched The Matrix. I was living in communist Russia when the first one came out. And about 2 years ago, it was a really rainy day. And for like $10, I saw like this 4-pack of the Matrix movies at Walmart. And I'm like, okay, it's raining. I'm just going to binge watch these movies because there's been so much discussion. Well, I started watching these movies. And if you understand Greek mythology, the New World Order, I was like, oh my gosh, this movie isn't a shoot 'em up. This movie is about the system we live in, which, I've talked about on my channel, Admiralty Law, where they own our birth certificates and literally own us. This is what the Matrix was about. It opened up when it was in the orgy of Ishtar. They had this big Roman orgy where they were all generating the energy they needed. I mean, I watched both of them, all four of the movies a few times, and I was getting more information about what they were saying. And if you've actually ever listened to the lawsuit of the guy who says he actually wrote the Matrix movies and it was stolen by the Wachowski brothers, or were they sisters then, who became women? It was the Wachowski brothers, and then after they got paid off and got that big movie, they both twins became women. Really? Okay, so there you can see the whole trade-off of the whole system going on. And it's not just the Matrix movie, it's what happened around the Matrix, them stealing it. They had a fake wife, they took his child. They were literally using his script on the set, but denying they were using it. I mean, it was just a huge example of how the Hollywood system really works, and that Hollywood itself is part of the military mind control complex. If you study who founded Hollywood, you go back to the Rothschild family. All of those original movie people who started the studios were financed by Rothschild to bring about the New World Order and change humanity. Because as you were talking about before, with our grandparents, it was the radio. Then with our parents, it was the TV. And I mean, it's so hard to talk to people in the TV generation because they believe everything on the television. My mom's listened to a few of my podcasts and interviews, and she's literally cried afterwards because it destroyed, they were brought up after World War II. It literally destroyed everything. And, of course, people lost family members too. So it's just not a mental cost. It's realizing
Hmm.
that your uncle or your brother died for some insane New World Order agenda that had nothing to do with what they were telling you. And now we have the internet and AI, and that's controlling the reality that we exist in today.
And I think I'm not an area expert in this, Simone, but what I think what you're talking about is referred to as cognitive dissonance. It's very difficult for people to comprehend the depth of depravity, like,
Yes.
even what we're seeing now with the exposure of the human trafficking and the Epstein list, and the fact that, there was probably a lot more people involved in that than we'd like to admit, and who was involved in it, and just the horrific things that are happening in our environment today. And I'm certain much of this is instigated with the level of violence that we're seeing, this escalation. It's just terrible. But one of the shows that I was thinking of, and I thought you might mention, was the Truman Show,
Oh, yes,
and the alternative reality, was
definitely
another
that.
one.
Yeah.
So what do we believe? What don't we believe? And I think I've noticed this with people and having conversations. And it's interesting too, you and we met at a conference. So when you speak at a conference, you have a chance to visit with people afterwards, and it's fun to get the feedback and hear other people's experiences, their questions, concerns. I often find that people, and especially now with regards to AI, but people, when we get fearful, we tend to shrink back, which rightfully so makes sense. It's I think, a form of preservation and protection. We can't do that. We can't allow others to dictate, to control, to craft narratives that are against our own better judgment. And I think we have that, especially, we're created in the image of God. I know you're a believer too. And we have got to return to that. I heard something not long ago about the very small percentage of people in America now that actually have a biblical worldview, which was deeply disturbing. And I think that's in large part a big source of our problems. We have drifted so far so quickly away from the values that made this country great, but more importantly, the biblical values that each of us should hold, to get ourselves centered again and in alignment with who we really are. And I think we've forgotten that. We've forgotten the power that we have. We think, oh, I'm just an average everyday person, American, whatever. There's nothing I can do to change the problems, with our government or with our society. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that we each have the power to do that.
If we didn't have so much power, they wouldn't be spending the last 75 years, really since the Civil War, trying to suppress us. I personally believe we're seeing the end of the Civil War right now. And I'm not sure if it's going the right way or the wrong way, but they're moving us to the next reality and the new realm that we're going to exist in for the future time. And you kind of answered this a little bit, but what can the public do? And you probably addressed this in your book, so I don't want to give away too much, but what can we do to push back against big tech and the military industrial complex to control the planet using AI? And are they already controlling the planet using AI?
I Yes and no. I think when we wrote the book, we wrote it from our perspective, which was, industry outsiders. We were not experts by any stretch. We've had great reviews on Amazon, and I think the thing that's probably the common thread there is people say, "Thank you for making this very straightforward."
Mhm.
It's not written for technology people. We just wanted to raise awareness. There's kind of three parts to the book. Where it came from, the AI, where we're at right now, where we think it's going. Our admonition and what we'd like to encourage everybody to do is become more civic minded, get involved on a local basis. That's where we can make the most difference. Sometimes that seems, kind of like a trite saying, like, run for your school board or do this or that. I think within every person, they kind of have areas Again, I would attribute that to God, a provocation of where you can make a difference. It's the things that concern you most. If you're a parent, certainly get involved in your kids' education and be involved in the school system. It's the old adage, you can't fight City Hall, which is true in a sense that it's difficult when an individual has to go against a large entity, whether it be a governmental system or a big tech company. But if enough people stand up, start asking questions, start pushing back, I even run across that on the simplest of levels, working with AI and writing sometimes. I remember just right after the day after Charlie Cook's assassination, I had put something in there. I wrote an article shortly after that about him. And what I immediately got back from AI on several different platforms was, this is disinformation. I have no record that Charlie Kirk has been assassinated, blah, blah, blah. You can push back even in AI and say,
Yes.
that's not true. I can provide you a series of links. When I do research, for example, and you're a good researcher, it's difficult to get to the bottom of things, but I try to go back as far as I can to original sources. Do not take AI's word for things. And we've already been doing that for a while, which is a detriment to us. We plug something in the browser, we ask, whether whatever browser we're in, something, and we just assume that information is factual and true. And as I mentioned earlier, 90% of it comes from three sources. I mean, it used to be in the old days, you had to get at least three bids just to make a decision on contracts. So don't go with that. Do your own due diligence, do your own research, and definitely push back on AI. One last thing I'll say, because you did ask this, what can the average person do? Our local officials, and I worked for one for a number of years, an elected official. They have so much responsibility, they can't possibly be experts in all areas. So when told things like, hey, this is a virus, it's deadly, the first response is, let's react and spend millions of dollars and do all of this, infrastructure, which turned out to be absolutely not needed at all. And I guess my point being, you can learn a little bit of information in a particular area, whether you're a parent, whether you want to get involved in veterans affairs or whatever it might be, wherever your area of interest is. And with just a little bit of elbow grease, with a little bit of due diligence, you can become more informed and more of an expert than the people that are elected to represent you. And I guess that's what I would say is, that's where, as an average everyday citizen, that's where we can make the greatest impact.
I noticed you said you made the quote, you can't push back against City Hall. I actually, City Hall is the most effective place to push back because it's at the local level. And I just wonder who
Yep.
came up with that slogan. I wonder if it was AI. Because if you go to AI, you can look at your general plan and figure out how these systems are being implemented in your area, and you can literally fight back and you can do it specifically. You don't have to pound the halls of Congress or the Senate. You can do it right in your hometown. You can do it at your county fair. You can do it at your school district meetings or whatever. So they want us to feel like we have no power. They wouldn't spend the last 100,000 years between the Inquisition, the World Wars, the killing off of the indigenous people all over the world. If we didn't have power, they wouldn't spend so much time trying to force us into compliance. So, is
That's
there
right.
anything else you might want to add just to finish up? I know people are curious about your book, but is there anything else that you might want to tell people before we sign off today?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. So I really appreciate this opportunity, Simone. And it's great meeting you, a few months back. That was a lot of fun. And, that's a nice thing to be aware of too, is I think people tend to get isolated in times of crises, which we've been in now for a number of years. And shrink back. But the reality is, there's a whole lot of people that have the exact same questions that we do, the exact same concerns and reservations, and also think and share the same types of values that we do. So I would just encourage people to find other like-minded people like that, and find ways to use your voice to speak up and to not be silenced, and to express your views and your opinions and your concerns.
Well, and I think that's really important. I haven't been doing my podcast, as I mentioned, very often because I spent the last 6 months touring and organizing events to bring together like-minded people, because one of the things I've realized over having my channel is people feel so isolated. Their family makes fun of them. I literally have three separate friends who were married for years, and they literally got divorced over the last elections because their spouse became
Mm.
insane. And like, I know some of these people my whole life. I knew them as a couple, as couples, and they were literally getting divorced over people they don't even know. I mean, that, and people do change as they, and these people were married for 35 and 40 years. Maybe the political thing was just the final trigger. I'm not inside their heads, but this isn't the way. You need to go find like-minded people, as you were saying. And as you go out in the world, you're going to build this whole new connection. Again, especially I do a lot in the human trafficking realm. Most of the people are people of faith. So you're not only going into new friendships and people who have an understanding, you're also fighting and working together for God's promise and for what He wants humanity to be. So there's whole different elements. A lot of times at the beginning of our event, we'll say this isn't religious or political, but the people who get up and speak are religious or are political. That's not the aim of our event, but that is really what's going on. So I think joining these events are really powerful. And they can give you friends that you didn't know, because you might be missing some of your old friends because you voted for Trump and they voted for Biden, or they voted for Biden and you voted for Trump. It goes both ways. But the anger and the insanity really, from the right side, I see it's frustration that's going on because the rules aren't being followed. But with the left, it doesn't even make sense sometimes. And of course, there's things that go on in the right that don't make sense to me, but it's a brainwashing. And we had a few speakers on brainwashing and Project Monarch, of how the media has been used by the industrial complex. I had a few speakers at the last event, and how AI, like you said, is being used to create a mindset that often isn't a reality. It's just the mindset of the Wikipedia people and the Reddit people. I mean, I didn't even know Reddit was like like I was when I was in college, Wikipedia was not considered a real source. You couldn't even use that on
No, same here. In grad school, they told us do not use your papers will be penalized if you refer to Wikipedia. It is not considered a scholarly source. Do not use it.
and now that's what the AI is using. I mean, everything says this isn't good for us. So I know people probably want to pick up your book after this. So why don't you just tell us how we can contact you? Is your email? And again, I'm going to put the book down in the in the comment section below.
Sure, it's easy to find on Amazon. It looks like this. I don't know if you can read that, but it's The Fight for the Future of Humanity. I know you'll put that link down below, and we have it on Amazon. Let's see, I'm trying to think. It comes in every format. So Kindle. We've been working on an audio version that's not quite done yet, but you can get that book on Amazon, and then I'm on Substack just under my name, Kathleen Goble, and then I'm on X and True Social. So those are good places to find me as well. And I think the last thing you asked me if there's one more thing I wanted to say, I would also highly encourage everybody to vote. And I know that's another area. We've got midterms here coming up. Now in some states and later this summer, like in California. But it's imperative. And there again, people have been discouraged, thinking, "Hey, there's cheating, there's election fraud." That's all true, but we still have to vote. And I think it's not only a privilege, but also an obligation, civic responsibility. People need to get out and vote. So that's something else I would encourage people to do locally as well.
All right. Well, Kathleen, you sure gave us a lot to think about. And after hearing
Yes.
all this information about AI and the challenges society faces, it really does sound like we need a 28th Amendment, and that should be added to the Constitution. And thanks for helping us better understand the challenges and technology continues to present to the public, and how we can push back against the totalitarian practice of world governments and the military and the industrial complex, whose goals are the new world order government of one religion, one military. And I don't think that's going to be good for any of us. This plan has been in place since 1122, and we're actually seeing the fruition of it in today's society. So it's not anything new. I know AI isn't new, but the totalitarian control of the world has been in place for a long time. So AI is either going to bring it to fruition or we're going to use it to fight back against them. So that's my goal, is to use AI for the good purposes and fight back against the people who are trying to control our minds. So please do your own research and come to your own conclusions. As always, this presentation is made in hopes that never again will the truth be lost in translation. Thank you for listening. This is Kathleen and Simone signing off for today.
Thank you.